You're now sitting at the Wavetable.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wavetable episode 23. This episode is featuring Nick Wilson, who is actually or was a lecturer of mine. How you going, Nick?
Good. Thanks for having me, Ben.
I'm very pleased to have you on because, I feel like I learned a lot from you as well as the other lecturers at SAE, and just the combination of all your different teaching styles has kind of I feel like it's helped to kickstart my career as a musician. So yeah,
Right.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's great to hear that. And I mean, I should also mention that us lecturers learn a lot from the students. You know, we get lots of new ideas coming in. So by getting ideas from you guys, we don't sort of stay just stuck in our own kind of ways. So it's it's a two-way thing, I think.
Yeah, I had a previous lecturer on, Will Hatton, a couple of episodes ago, and he said that sometimes when he was teaching, he would have a full game plan of this is what we're going to learn, right? But then he goes into the classroom, presents it, and then or not necessarily kids, but all the students are like, oh, we already know how to do that. I want to learn how to do this. And then someone else in the back yells, I want to do this. And yeah, I remember that was just exactly the scenario with multiple people just screaming out multiple different things that they wanted to learn.
Yeah. Can get a bit chaotic sometimes, but that's all part of the fun.
Is there any is there anything you do to kind of combat that? Or is it pretty much just trying to know a bit of everything?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, sometimes you just got to kind of gauge the room and see if the plan that you've got, it could be that some people it's the noisiest kind of loudmouths in the class will sometimes kind of give the sort of I already know this kind of line, and maybe they don't really. They're just, I don't know. It's always just a bit of a hard one. So you try to kind of customize and go with the flow to a degree, but then you got to be mindful that just because some louder people know stuff, maybe some quieter people don't, and you got to just juggle it a bit, I suppose. It's instinct. Yeah. It's an instinct thing, I suppose.
And like you said, even if someone says they know something, maybe they don't know it to the extent you do. So just digging that little bit deeper, I guess, to find out the true extent of their knowledge is helpful.
Definitely.
So I wanted to jump into your musical journey in its entirety. No, obviously that would take a long time to explain, but give us a brief rundown of where you started with music and your journey up until now.
Yeah, I suppose my earliest memories are that we had a piano in the house that was my grandmother's, and she didn't really play it anymore and shipped it down so that the kids could have a play on the piano sort of thing. So it was kind of sitting in the lounge room, and I banged on it a bit and showed some interest. So at about the age of 9, my parents got me into piano lessons, and that kind of drifted along for a few years. I mean, I was kind of into it, but I wasn't any kind of great musical genius or anything. I was sort of middle, I didn't practice enough and stuff like that. But when I was about 15, I had friends who started to want to form bands and stuff like that. So I went over to a friend's house who didn't play an instrument as far as I knew, but he had this bass guitar sitting in the corner, and I said, I didn't even know that there was a difference between a bass guitar and a normal guitar. but I said, you're playing guitar? And he said, well, bass, actually. And then he said, how about you play the synthesizer? Because it was the 80s, and if you played keyboards, It was kind of expected that you'd be playing a synthesizer. So, and he had someone he knew who had a synthesizer, so we, okay, yep, cool, I'll play synthesizer. So I told my parents I wanted to get a synthesizer, and started, the weekend job in the bakery so I could save some funds to buy one. And
Yeah, they were like really expensive back then, right?
yeah, I think the one I got was the Casio CZ1000. That was my first synthesizer, which I think was an 85, I think that came out. And by memory, it was about $400 in like mid 80s kind of money. Yeah, and then a few years later, forming bands and getting another synthesizer and another one, expanding the collection. And then members of bands kind of dropped away. Like it was the sort of initial lineup was guitar, bass, drums, singer, and me on synthesizer. But gradually, if the drummer, we couldn't get a new drummer, it's like, okay, get a drum machine, get a sequencer, get a sampler. So I started to get more into the technology and getting more electronic music minded as I got into my early 20s. And then I studied music at tertiary level at Melbourne Uni. I thought I should probably try to take it seriously and get a proper music degree because I was earning money by teaching piano lessons and also doing a little bit of playing piano in restaurants, stuff like that. So I thought, okay, get a music degree and get a bit more knowledgeable. And that was I was majoring in composition because I figured that was a kind of path to go to, because I like to just be creative was my main focus. Yeah. Like I wasn't so much about becoming the greatest classical pianist or anything like that. I mean, I didn't mind playing the piano, but it wasn't ever going to be an area for me to excel in. There were always going to be heaps better piano players around than me.
Right. And I think a lot of people, they just want to be creative as well. But then these days, with how easy it is to access DAWs, they get caught up in like the mixing side of things. And so I guess it's kind of similar.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a lot of the emphasis. I mean, I'm kind of aware of this from teaching at SAE, that there's a lot of emphasis about how to produce properly, and it's all about how you're meant to use a compressor or how you're meant to EQ these sounds. And and it's useful information, but it does tend to get a bit out of proportion sometimes with actually just being creative and having fun.
Yeah. I agree. Like at the end of the day, there's so many songs in the world that could have been mixed just that 5 or 10% better, but it doesn't matter because the creative side of things was just so amazing that people don't care about that 5 or 10% mix optimization.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, what got you into the sound art side of things as opposed to music? I don't know exactly like the line between those two, but yeah, do you want to like give us kind of the difference?
Well, it's a tricky one because, in terms of the difference, I mean, some people would argue there is no difference, and other people would say, no, there definitely is. It's probably got to do with context. So if you create something to be listened to in a very specific context, so maybe in a gallery, or let's say, I don't know, let's say walking over a bridge, we were going to put in some speakers and have some, I don't know, tinkly sounds playing. Or let's say we were going to, it would, like, it's kind of more like situational, like sound art is for a specific place or time or context, whereas music is more like something you could maybe, depending on where you like to listen to music and what you like to listen to, you might put it on at a club if you're a DJ, or you might listen to it on your headphones when you're going for a jog. So it has that, whereas the sound art is more specific. But it's also kind of tends to be more abstract sound, whereas in music we expect melodies, rhythms, that we've got certain expectations about how we call something music, although that gets argued about and contested. So as I got more into synthesizers and learnt about stuff that wasn't just to do with keys and chords and how to move your fingers up and down the keyboard, but it was more about how to manipulate waveforms and envelopes and all the things that you get into when you program sounds or create your own sounds in a synthesizer, then you start to think of sound as something a little bit more abstract. And then that gives you maybe a way of thinking that you can apply in a sound art context, if that makes sense.
I guess that a lot of modern music that focuses specifically on sound design is kind of like right on that line between sound art and music, right? Because there's a lot of songs that people wouldn't really listen to at home. Like they're specifically created for club scenarios. And like, I guess that's kind of similar to how sound art is specifically created for like art galleries or like a grand opening for a new bridge or something like that.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe that's an example of how these categories are blending more and more. I mean, like you could be commissioned to write a piece of music specifically to be listened to on headphones, or you could just decide to mix your track because you expect that people are going to listen to it more in headphones, or maybe you mix or create something because you want it to be a radio hit. So you might mix it to make sure the vocals and melody come through really clearly, and maybe the actual song structure is really disciplined in terms of verse and chorus and nothing going for too long because you want someone to play it in that 4-minute slot on the radio. So it's kind of the same thing, really, isn't it? Music is getting more like sound art, and sound art kind of bleeds into music.
Have you got any thoughts on people who mix their songs for phones? Like, phone speakers?
Yeah, not really. I mean, I suppose it's something I haven't gotten that much into, other than I suppose, speakers are a little bit different because they're going to fill up the room, and you're going to get, I mean, like that might affect how you mix the stereo balance. So maybe for headphones, you might go less extreme with the panning because it's going to be so extreme anyway that the speakers are on each ear. But then other people might say, oh, well, no, it's headphones, and people want to hear all this stuff in the headphones. So I don't know.
It's that tough balance, right? Like whatever you do, there's always someone at the other end saying it, I want it this way.
I mean, I don't really mix with headphones, but I would probably check my mixes with headphones. But whether I should be more mindful about thinking, well, this is going to be more of a headphone sort of album or something, maybe that's something I should consider. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah, perhaps. Because I guess there's definitely types of music where you just want to like lay down, chuck the headphones on and listen to it. And then, there's music where you chuck it on big speakers and you go crazy. So I guess that's something for people to think about, like be mindful of what what context people are going to be listening to your music in when you're creating it, and mix accordingly, I guess.
And I mean, the situation that I'm in these days, being a middle-aged parent, is that if I put something on the stereo playing through the speakers, I'm probably going to have like kids running around distracting me and talking, and it's not going to be a focused listen. And the only times I get to have that kind of focused listening is if I'm when I'm coming home from work and I've got my stuff on my phone or whatever. And so it's probably the case that people today are listening much more on headphones than what they used to.
I would definitely agree.
Yeah, so it's worth considering that as one aspect when you're creating your music. Yeah,
for sure. So we've spoken about your music a little bit, and I assume that your music was among the first releases on your label Clan Analogue.
Funnily enough, no.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't form the label. The label was formed in the early 90s, and not really even as a label. It was formed in Sydney by a guy called Brendan Palmer, hooked up with a few other people, and basically formed electronic music collective in
Right.
1992, and they started meeting at a pub and kind of talking about synths and things, and then they started putting on nights just at like local bars, and then they thought, oh, let's put out a record, which was like a compilation vinyl EP of the artists that were in this kind of collective, and that and then Brendan went down and got people in Canberra to form a branch, and then people in Melbourne formed a branch that became this nationwide sort of thing. And that was it seems it's quite different now than what it was then, because back then it was very, Australia was very sort of rock in its musical scene.
Yeah.
And if you were into like synths and electronic music, it was a bit more unusual. So it was kind of like... basically an underground sort of collective for people into electronic music, and before we got really too heavily into all the different genres that we have today. So I didn't actually really join up until about 5 years later with Clan Analogue in Melbourne, and then people came and went, and different people that were involved with running the label moved away, went overseas, settled down, whatever it might have been. And I found that, I was kind of one of the main movers and shakers by the kind of late 90s in terms of the Melbourne end of things. If we had an album out, I'd organise the launch in Melbourne for it.
Cool.
And then it just got to around about early 2000s, and it was sort of fell to me to kind of be the inverted commas label manager, which makes it sound like it's some kind of real job, but it's not. It's just I'll be the person that tries to coordinate all this. So and I had a couple of tracks on compilation albums. I put together a couple of the compilation albums, but it wasn't until about 3 years ago that I actually put out one of my own albums on Clan Analogue.
Oh wow.
Yeah, which was in 2017. So
so you were like essentially doing work for the label for a long time before you actually put out your own stuff on it. I'm very surprised by that, actually.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, it's like if you think, what's the motivation for putting in all this time and effort to keep a label going? And I think a lot of people would say, oh, yeah, it's so that you have an outlet for your own music, because back when I was in my 20s, it was like the great dream was to get signed to a label. That was what every artist wanted, so that would be the pathway to fame and fortune. And then it gets to a point, I need to get my own label, so I have that outlet. But the only problem is then 25 years goes by when you're just putting all this time into other people's music. And
right.
And it's like, I better actually get something of my own out to make this all worthwhile, because that was part of the reason why I did it in the first place.
That's interesting, because, I know someone who, at the moment, who I kind of feel is going through the same thing with running a label and then just now starting to get their own music going again. So I wanted to ask about the name Clan Analogue, because it kind of implies that it's only analog music that is allowed on the label, or what was the other word you used for it?
Don't know.
Not community.
Oh, collective.
Anyway.
Collective.
Yeah, collective.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think it came about because at the time in the early 90s, it was this time when the mainstream artists were using digital synthesizers, and it was and there was all this cheap old analog synths that you could get at cash converters and stuff, which were basically was early 80s gear that you could just pick up cheap. So young people, back then I was 22 or something, were kind of into this new kind of techno stuff that was coming out, whereas the older the old scene, the mainstream was they were kind of trying to do pop and rock and using these new digital synths and things. That was the sort of so if you were into all this old analog stuff that was that you could do all this really cool techno music with, or house music or acid house or whatever it was, depending on what you were into, that was a kind of it was like an underground badge of honor, like, hey, I'm into analog,
Right.
So that was how the Clan Analogue thing came. And actually, I think the Clan, well, there was a thing called the Cave Clan back then. I don't know if it still exists or not, but it's basically this like you used to see spray painted around, like graffiti at like train stations and stuff, like Cave Clan, spelt,
Right.
I think with a, I can't remember if it was with a C or a K, but basically they were this sort of secretive bunch of people that would explore the drains of Melbourne. They would actually go down with like torches and helmets and stuff, and they had all these maps, and it would be this sort of not really legal thing to go exploring the drains. And I think it might have been influenced by that. So let's have something like that, but it's like for electronic music. And there was also you could actually, with a Roland synthesizer, what the early Clan Analogue artists did up in Sydney was that they got gaffer tape at their gigs and put them where it said Roland on the back of the synth, and you put gaffer tape over it, and you could turn it just into the word Clan. Right. So like so the O, the ROLAND, will get rid of the D, get rid of the R, and just turn the O into a C by adding a little bit of guff onto there. So that was, I don't know which of those ideas came first, but that was the general influence. But yeah, there's no rule about having to use analog. I mean, most of the Clan Analogue artists don't use analog. Well, some of them do, but it's not. It's just it's whatever. Like it's more of an attitude. It's more of a philosophy. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I guess the wording reflected the attitude at the time of the creation, but like things have changed over the years.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you ever get students who want to release on Clan Analogue?
Not so much, but occasionally I might get a student to, well, not occasionally, like every now and then I get a student to help out with, like, say, mixing something or mastering or something like that. So I do, get student input from time to time. And an artist that we're currently looking at releasing is actually a student somewhere else at a different music school, music production school. So don't know. Maybe now that you've mentioned it, I'll get some more calls. Maybe now that you put the word out. Yeah.
I'm sure I don't know anyone who's in like your current classes, but on the off chance that they're watching, hit Nick up about releasing on Clan Analogue.
Yeah.
So are there any like common themes that your students tend to struggle with? Because I feel like pretty much everyone has like these similar learning patterns where you kind of learn something and then you go too far with it and then you kind of come back. And I feel like there just might be like one or two things that kind of stand out among most or a lot of your students. If you could.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that I do sometimes bring up with the students is just getting everything too perfect. And I mean, it's what we spoke about a little bit earlier about the emphasis on what's correct production and mixing and all those technical things. And because the place I teach at SAE is it's kind of oriented towards audio production, maybe without so much of an emphasis necessarily on music. I mean, although music is part of that. But so I'm always interested in the creativity and the art, and that tends to kind of work against the grain of technical production, because if you learn technical production, you're basically studying a lot of models of what has been done and what is considered industry standard and what is successful. Whereas with art and creativity, you're that's kind of like all about breaking the mold and trying out new things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, like being creative as opposed to learning the whole specific mixing side of things, it not only allows you to like sound more unique and, you know, be free of the restraints of like traditional mixing or whatever, but it also just allows you to put out more music because, like you were saying, like the perfectionism, people get caught up in that and like trying to make every single song perfect, and they just never end up putting any music out because of that.
Yeah, and back when I was your age, like in my mid-20s, it was quite hard to record or finish producing a track because hard disk recording hadn't really come in yet. So if we wanted to record something, we had to pay for studio time. So which meant that you'd only record like 2 tracks a year, you know, because you'd be saving up your money to get back into the studio. And what would tend to happen is you'd come home that night and listen to it back because you'd been in the studio for 12 hours, like recording and mixing and stuff. And then you'd come home and you'd listen to it, and there'd be all these things that you were unhappy about in terms of the mix, but you sort of just had to. And, you know, if I look back, there's probably things I should have released that I didn't because I was thinking, oh, no, we need to go and record that again in 6 months' time when we've saved up another, you know, bit of money for it. When actually now I listen back, I think, oh, it sounds really cool, you know. So, I mean, I think perfection is one of the things I do sometimes say to the students is perfection is the enemy of art, because as soon as something is perfected, it's kind of like dead. It's kind of locked up and finished, and then there's no more creativity. So,
right, I love that quote. Perfection is the enemy of art. That's great. But yeah, like going off how you were talking about how you had to save up for 6 months to get back in the studio just because you wanted to fix a few things, like to like think about how many more songs you could have written in that time that would like be even better, like, or not necessarily better, but more suited to your current feelings of creativity. And I think just modern producers need to take a page out of that book. Just focus on being creative. It's okay if your mix is 90% done. Just release it.
Yeah, for sure.
And so since going off your wise words and the fact that how long have you been teaching now, actually?
Well, I've been teaching since, I don't know, for about 30-something years I've been teaching. But yeah, because I started teaching piano when I was 17 as a way of earning money after school and stuff. I've been teaching like at college, like tertiary level for about 10 years now.
Sweet. Was teaching piano your first job, or did you have other jobs before that? I did the like working in the bakery on the weekends, which I think I mentioned before, that's right. And all that kind of. But when I was like 17 and finished school, I thought, oh yeah, you know, I've heard that you can earn a bit of money from teaching piano, like it's about 2 or 3 times the hourly rate of that kind of shit job in the bakery that I just had. So, but for quite a few years, you know, it was kind of juggling. Like I'd have a day job working like in an office or something and just do a few lessons in the evening. And then I was playing piano at a restaurant on Friday and Saturday nights. So considering you've got teaching piano since 17 and like 10 years of tertiary lecturing now, have you got any advice for people who aspire to be teachers of some variety of the musical fields?
I suppose just get stuck into it. I mean, like when I started when I was 17, I remember like somehow I put an ad in the paper and some mother brought around her 3 kids and it was like, and I was just thinking, oh, you know, do I actually know how to teach piano? I didn't really have much of a clue as to how to actually impart that knowledge. And I taught them for about, I don't know, 4 months or something, and then they lost interest, and the mum sort of stopped the lessons. But it was like, and I was just thinking, because they were probably the shittest lessons that anyone's ever had learning piano. But at least it just gets the ball rolling, and then you improve. So, and once you get going with it, and you start to find ways of imparting the knowledge and having fun with it, it's a great way to earn a living. So, and I suppose it keeps you, like I said before, about getting, learning from the students. It keeps you in touch with new ways of getting inspired and getting ideas. You're in that creative environment. Whereas, a lot of people my age who were great musicians, but they sort of went and got a job as something else, whatever, working in a bank or whatever it might be. It could be anything. And gradually they drift away from music and creativity and stuff. And sometimes they come back to it later in life. But, the only thing you've got to consider is the kind of burnout that can happen if you're all day you're talking about music and you're teaching and working with students with their music projects, and then you can come home and just think, well, I just want to have a complete break from, I'm just sick of all that music stuff. That can happen. So that's the kind of, you've got to balance that. But so for some people it works better to not have their day job being anything to do with music, and that can help some people to remain creative out of their work time. So it kind of depends on your personality. And
exactly, yeah. I definitely feel like that phrase, it's like do what you love and you don't work a day in your life. I definitely don't think that applies to everyone at all. Just like what you've just said is like a perfect example, because you love music so much, like it's your whole life, and then you have these days where you go home and you don't want anything to do with it. So I guess like you said, being aware of who you are as a person, what your goals are. Like if you just want to be involved in music, it doesn't matter in what way, then I guess teaching is definitely a really good job. But if you want to have if you really want to make the most out of your career as an artist who has an alias, or just an artist, then I guess being a teacher can hinder that, because you might not want to work on your music once you get home. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, but it depends on the personality, and it depends on, it goes in waves as well. You go through cycles.
Yeah, for sure.
Sometimes you've got to take a break from things to build up your enthusiasm again, or your inspiration, or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. Yeah, I like to do not long breaks, but sometimes I have breaks where I work more on the visual side of things, and then that just, gets inspiration going and makes me want to go straight back into music.
Yeah, for sure.
So on top of running a label and teaching music and having a family, you've been studying a master's degree and writing a book. How on earth have you managed to balance all these things?
With difficulty, and being able to go through times of not having a lot of sleep, and a certain degree of stubbornness, I suppose. But also like for example, you mentioned writing the book. So I've just that book has just come out. But it's first of all, I didn't write it; I edited it, so it's a whole bunch of different people, and I wrote like one chapter. But it's kind of been chugging along for about a few years, that project. So sometimes, sometimes when you keep projects going a little bit on the back burner, it's kind of easy to just kind of let them kind of fall by the wayside. But I suppose I've got a little bit of that stubbornness that I just kind of keep nudging things along until they're finished, even if it's just a little bit. So even if you just say, well, every Wednesday night for 2 hours, I'm going to work on this thing that has been going, this project that's been running for the last 2 years, but I'm just going to, every set bit of time in my week, that's what I devote to that thing. And so you're just kind of pushing those projects along, which means things can take a while to come to fruition, but hopefully they get there. So, and making things kind of relate to other things. So, for example, you mentioned a study. So for my masters, I'm doing that at Box Hill Institute, and it's quite an encouraging experimental music there. So I did an experimental kind of performance as not last year, but the year before, as one of my assignments I had to do. We had to do an experimental performance, and I did this thing of sampling the audience's social media posts. In a live thing, and it was just like a kind of an assignment. But then last year, I got it included in a thing called the Jolt Sonic Arts Festival at Footscray Community Arts Centre, and I'm going to be doing it in the Fringe Festival, Melbourne Fringe, as a streamed performance in 2 weeks. So you can get these things and you can develop them further, and you can, So if you're doing lots of different things, you try to make them integrate in some way. If that works.
Yeah, that's definitely a helpful tip, and I also like how you said you did 2 hours of work per week for the book. I feel like that's a really good approach, because obviously editing a book is a daunting task, especially this was the first book you've ever published, right?
Yeah.
So I imagine that must have been a whole new thing to learn, and very intimidating for most people. So most people might look at that and think, how the hell am I going to do this? There's no way. But if you just segment out a small amount of time per week, it'll allow you to keep chugging along, as you say. And then the project does eventually come to fruition, even though it only took a couple hours per week. It's not really that big of a time investment on a per week basis. But over a while, you do still get there. And I think a lot of people can take something from this, because we tend to start all these things and then I guess we look at the big picture and we can't really see the path to get there. And so the path to get there is really to just make small increments, and you will eventually get there. It's just a matter of thinking, what do I need to do right now, rather than what is everything I need to do to eventually get there.
For sure. And it's also about kind of same kind of thing, breaking it down into the smaller components and saying, all right, I don't quite know about how to actually get it turned into the finished thing, but what I do know about is how to email all the writers and say, hey, please get your chapters to me by this date. And then once you've done that, okay, now I've just got to read one every week and get a red pen out, print it and make any edits, and just break it down very much step by step, and just get one step at a time along the path.
Because, I will kind of, if I don't do that, I'll essentially have a list of things that I need to do in my head. And then I think of another thing, and then one thing goes out the other side of my head. And then I think of that again, and then something else goes out. It's just impossible. Can't retain all that information at the same time. So take it slow, I guess.
Yeah. And also make notes, because if there's too much stuff to hold in the brain at one time, have a spreadsheet or something, there's all different project management tools today that you can, we don't have to remember everything all the time, do we? We can just go back to our notes and see where something was left off and just continue from there.
Yeah. So unfortunately I wasn't able to read the entire book because it's very expensive. But I did have a read of the preview, and so I can't speak on the entirety of its contents. So would you like to give us a quick plug and overview of the book?
Yeah, well, I'll just kind of hold it up. Here it is. Interpreting the Synthesizer, Meaning Through Sonics. It's following up from a couple of events I organised at SAE a few years ago called the Synthposiums. So it's kind of like conferences about synthesizers, basically. So we had a few presenters. A couple of presenters came from overseas, which was great. One from England and one from New Zealand. And a couple of people presented on Skype, I think it was, from London. And as well as some local people. So it's just all different aspects of synthesizers. And the theme was meaning through sonics. So it's kind of like about, well, okay, there's a lot of stuff out there about the technicalities of synthesizers, but why do we think that synths are cool? Or why do you think they're not cool, if that's what you think? It's kind of a subjective thing, but there's an idea about why we think an electric guitar might be cool, but there hasn't been that much of a look at synthesizers in that kind of way. So that was the idea behind it. So we've got a bunch of different interpretations of that. So one guy, David Prescott Steeb, for example, local Melbourne artist, he wrote a chapter about gear acquisition syndrome. So it's been something discussed in about this sort of people that just collect more and more gear, but they may or may not actually do anything with that gear. It's just this idea, okay, once I have that one more synth, I'm going to be able to just make this amazing record, but it's always deferred. So he did a sort of a psychological study of that mindset as his chapter. And then these guys in London wrote a chapter about modular synths and just the idea of live performance and what is live performance with modular synthesizers. And then another guy did a chapter about synths in hip hop and when hip hop shifted from being very much focused on sampling to starting to actually more and more incorporate synths, and what was it about that time that caused hip-hop artists to actually because it was very much a thing with hip-hop that it was all about sampling and why was there that shift? So there's just a few different themes explored by different writers in the book.
Cool. So the story of how synthesizers came to be is a very interesting one because since it's not seen as a traditional instrument really, I feel like people were very hesitant to adopt it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's part of that and part of the kind of complexity of it. So maybe some artists being a bit scared about do they have to understand physics and electronics and stuff to use those instruments? And for some people that is a attractive thing because maybe they've got a way of thinking about sound that is sort of that mindset kind of works. I mean, there were, if you think about the late 60s when the Moog synth became, was the first sort of mass-produced synthesizer. I mean, there was like an early album by George Harrison where he got hold of one of these Moog synthesizers because it was sort of like a hip thing. Like I think Mick Jagger got one and George Harrison got himself one. And but I think his album, he more or less just sort of paid someone to come over and do the album for him because he didn't really know how to work this device. And then in the 70s, you started to get more synthesizers that had that were kind of relatively straightforward to use if you even if you didn't quite know what you were doing. They at least had a keyboard and you'd get a sound reasonably quickly and easily. That was the Mini Moog in early 70s was really the first synth that was a little bit more accessible in that way. So, but yeah, in the late 70s, early 80s, with post-punk and new wave music, it becomes quite a thing for like those artists who weren't musically proficient. Like, because with punk music, it was always about, well, you don't have to be a virtuoso musician to play in a punk band, and that when that attitude kind of carried through into post-punk music and new wave, that became all the early 80s synth pop bands. It was none of it was about being a great musician. It was just can you get like a catchy simple melody on this synth, and it just kind of had this great new sound. It was all about a new sound at that time.
I can totally understand how people would have been like intimidated by the keyboardless synths that were just buttons, knobs, and wires. Would you say that the Mini Moog essentially was like the breaking point where, it started to catch on for mass adoption because of the added keyboard?
Yeah, I mean, the original Moog had a keyboard. That was the first synth. Well, the first device to be called a synth that had a keyboard, a piano-style keyboard, was the original Moog. But that was still quite hard to get it going with a sound, because you had to, like you'd play the key. I mean, there's one at MESS, Melbourne Electronic Sound Studio in North Melbourne, which I had to go on one time, and it was quite hard to get a sound out of it. You really had to get all the cable in the right order to actually get something out of it. Yeah. So, but then the Mini Moog was like, it's all kind of routed in a way that you just play it, you get a sound. Cool. And then you can alter that sound, but you still at least get a sound, even if you don't know what to do with all the knobs.
Okay.
So yeah, that was certainly a breakthrough. Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, more the ease of access for sounds. In combination with having a keyboard, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, what's up next for you with the book done, and how close are you to finishing the masters actually?
I'm still a little way away. I mean, like we said before about having things chug along on the back burner a bit. I mean, because I'm working full time and family and everything, it's not a fast thing. I'm just doing like one or two subjects at a time. So it's going to take. I've been doing it for 3 years already, and I think it'll take me another 2 years to finish it.
Okay.
Yeah, but I sort of can't let myself worry about that. I'm just going to, I mean, the main thing is to sort of enjoy the journey as well. You've got to, you can't, if you're too focused on the end goal, but the actual thing itself isn't that enjoyable or interesting, then that can be disheartening. So you sort of got to just sort of appreciate it as you go along. So yeah, I'm not stressing too much about how long it's taking, or try not to. Just okay, that's the way. It's just kind of going along, and it'll get there.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree. If you don't enjoy the process, then why even do it?
Yeah.
So what's up next for you now that the book's done?
Well, I've got a couple of little things. Like I mentioned, I'm doing this performance in a couple of weeks' time in the Fringe, which is an online streamed performance where I'm going to sample the social media posts of the audience. So it's basically...
And people can just find that by typing in the Fringe on Facebook.
Yeah, and it's called I Am Sharing. That's the name of my show. So I Am Sharing. So it's so basically I just kind of sit there and wait for the audience to. I mean, there's instructions come up for them, but it's that they can share me anything to a social, via Facebook or Twitter or whatever, that has, as long as it's got some kind of sound in it, and then I just sample that and build with it, just grabbing all the stuff from the audience. And I don't preview anything. I don't listen to it and say, oh, well, I think that sound, I'll just see if that's all right to use. I just sample it and it's in there. And then I've got to mold it and manipulate it on the fly. So that's a show. I'm doing three performances in 2 weeks' time. And then my plan is, I'll probably try to record all 3 nights and then maybe get the best bits and maybe get an album out of it. If it turns out well. And then the week after that, I'm doing another show in the Fringe Festival called Drones for an Empty Space, and that's with a whole bunch of different artists. But it's to launch the new Clan Analogue compilation album, which is called Distance. So Distance Sounds from an Empty Place, Sounds for an Empty Place. And that's like a compilation of drone tracks. So we're going to do a performance online on Twitch, which will be kind of like about 8 artists in different locations, some in Melbourne, some in Sydney, there's one in Canada, and we're just going to be jamming together. Like different artists will come in and out at different times, and because it's drone music, it doesn't matter if it's not quite perfectly in sync because it's just layers of synth noises and stuff like that. So and that'll go for about that's like a 5-hour performance that we'll be doing.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that album is actually coming out this week, I think, the end of the week, of which I have one track on it with a project called City Frequencies, which is a collaboration with myself and a guy called Matt Adair. And for this particular track, we've sampled, what Matt did. Matt's my kind of technical kind of guy. He's got all these great experimental technical kind of ideas. So he sampled a whole lot of high frequency sounds from all the kind of surveillance cameras in the Melbourne CBD and all the kind of all the because they're all sending data around in frequencies way above our hearing, and all the kind of billboards at train stations and stuff and then he's pitch shifted that down into our frequency hearing range, and then we've sampled that and created this drone piece out of it. So that's on the album.
That's really cool. I'm very curious to hear how those data transmission sounds to our ears.
yeah. And I'm also working on an album with a German musician called Peter Pichler, and he's a kind of a virtuoso at playing the Trautonium. The Trautonium is this 1920s electronic musical instrument that was invented in Germany in the late 1920s. And so Peter's about the only musician in the world who can play this instrument as a virtuoso.
Oh, wow.
And so he came out to play in Melbourne in 2019, about 18 months ago, and we did a performance together with a friend of mine, Ray Howe, on vibraphone, and I was on synths. And so we're recording the stuff that we wrote together, and we're putting that out as an album in next year. So they're my kind of main things at the moment that are
awesome. That's that's a lot. Oh my god. I assume you've got everything out of the way, but just in case, we're about to wrap it up. And is there anything else you would like to shout out or draw attention to before we do?
Don't know. I suppose just check out. Maybe if you don't mind putting a few links to those things in your notes for the episode. Thanks for having me, Ben. It's been a really great chat.
Yeah, it's been great. So guys, please check out everything. Or I don't expect everyone to check out everything Nick's mentioned, but if something piqued your interest, like for example, for me, it was the data transmission frequencies being pitched down into the human hearing range. That's just such a cool idea to me. So I'm definitely interested in checking that one out. And I'll probably also check out the social media sampling stream as well. So yeah, thanks for coming on,
Cool.
Nick. Episode 23 featuring Nick Wilson. I'm your host, Astroreign. It's been great. Peace.
Thank you. And I'm going to go and listen to Astroreign now.